Hello, my name is Priya, and today let's talk about organic chemistry. So, we hear a lot about organic fruits and vegetables and organic manures and fertilizers and how they are natural. So, what exactly is this organic and what is organic chemistry? Organic is anything which comes from living organisms. And as you know, carbon forms a large part of all living organisms. Therefore, this whole field of study, organic chemistry, is dedicated to studying carbon and its compounds. Now, carbon can form compounds with his many friends, for example, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, sulfur, chlorine, fluorine, and many more. So this organic chemistry will be talking about how carbon combines with all these and itself to form compounds. So let's talk more in detail about this carbon, since this whole subject is about him. So carbon, as we know, has 6 electrons. Its atomic number is 6, and therefore we can say that it has 6 electrons. Now, we would have studied this before. For 6 electrons, the way it is distributed around the carbon nucleus is that the first 2 electrons are in the first shell. Now, the first shell is only big enough to have 2 electrons, and it is stable when it has 2 electrons. The remaining 4 electrons are present in the second shell of carbon. So here are those 4 electrons. Now, you might also recollect there is something called the octet rule, which states that any element is happy if it has an octet or 8 electrons in its outermost shell. This is true for carbon, that carbon would be a happy carbon if he has 8 electrons running around in its outermost shell. So right now it's only half happy because it only has 4 electrons. So what does it do? So what do we do when we need something and we don't have it? So the first thing is we can probably ask our friends. So carbon asks its friends, which are all of these, and sometimes they are able to share electrons. So carbon is able to share electrons with perhaps one of these or a few of these. And when a bond, or when there is a collaboration where they share electrons so that both this particular atom as well as this particular carbon are happy. Whenever there is a bond with sharing, it is called a covalent bond. So we know that carbon can form covalent bonds with these elements. Now let's see how. So carbon has these 4 electrons in its outermost shell. So I'm only going to draw those. And let's take, for example, carbon's simplest friend, which is hydrogen. Hydrogen, poor guy, has just 1 electron. So how can they help each other? Hydrogen needs 1 more electron to go around it because it has only the first shell, and the first shell needs to have 2 electrons. So hydrogen needs 1 more and carbon needs 4 more. So what if there are 4 hydrogens and each of them can share 1 electron with carbon? So here this electron runs around this hydrogen also, and this electron runs around this carbon also. So each of these 4 hydrogens can form 4 bonds with carbon. And now carbon, if you count all these electrons, has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 electrons. And therefore this is a happy carbon. So this is a normal story where the poor carbon who doesn't have all that he wants asks for help from his friends, forms a covalent bond by sharing electrons with, say, hydrogen. And hydrogen is happy because it has its 2 electrons running around it, and carbon is happy because it has its 8 electrons. Now you can visualize this as carbon having 4 hands, and that it needs to hold these 4 hands with some other element so as to get happy or to feel satisfied. So we can have 4 hydrogens. So each hydrogen has only 1 hand because each hydrogen has just 1 electron. So we have carbon's 4 hands held with 4 hydrogens, forming a happy carbon and a happy hydrogen. Together, they form this compound called methane. Now we'll talk about methane and the others in more detail. Let's see if we can do anything else. So we spoke about carbon. Now, carbon forming bonds with hydrogen. Let's see, this carbon has 4 hands. Another carbon atom also has 4 hands. Can they hold hands with each other? Yes, that's possible. So we can have one bond between a carbon and a carbon. So you have 2 electrons in this bond, and then the remaining of them could be hydrogens. Again, like in the case of this. We can also have many more carbons also joining hands to satisfy themselves, and also the hydrogen atom that associates with them. So this is how carbon can actually form bonds with its friends like hydrogen, and also itself, because it needs to share some electrons in order to become full octet. So let's quickly review what we have done so far. We studied that organic chemistry is nothing but the study of carbon and his friends and how it forms bonds with each of those. Carbon has 6 electrons, therefore it has 4 electrons in its outermost shell. This is also called carbon's valence, that it needs 4 more electrons to feel satisfied according to the octet rule, which states that a particular element is stable or carbon is satisfied if it has 8 electrons running around it. In order to fulfill its octet, carbon decides to share electrons. So for example, with hydrogen, which has 1 electron, it is able to share this 1 electron. With 4 hydrogens together, it can form a stable compound and be happy with 8 electrons running around it, and make the hydrogen happy by having 2 electrons running around the hydrogen. We also saw that carbon can form bonds with itself. So 1 carbon here and 1 carbon there, trying to make a family by having this 1 bond in the middle. You can have as many carbons as you want. In the next video, let's talk about, since carbon has 4 hands, what if it decides to hold 2 of its hands with another carbon? So can we have something like this? Let's talk about that in the next video.